There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
We have an outdoor gazebo in my backyard, and beneath it is a couch and some padded chairs. And I can't tell you how many summer afternoons I've spent on that couch reading. I plan to do the same thing this summer. It makes me happy. And last summer, I wasn't so happy. Every other day I'd walk outside with my book in hand to find a bird had done its business on the couch. It wasn't a flyby either. The fan in the ceiling of the gazebo was also covered, which meant the culprit enjoyed hanging out on the fan, where it relaxed and, well, took care of business. My wife and I tried a few tricks hoping to prevent the bird from doing it again, but none of them worked. We'll see what this summer brings. I had a theory about it, though. We have hawks that like to circle around the area looking for small prey to pounce upon. My theory was that the bird that left the surprises on the couch was trying to avoid the hawk. It was scared. Who wouldn't be? And the gazebo sheltered it from the hawk. Anyway, that was my theory. And then, one day, I caught the culprit in the act. It wasn't just one bird, it was a few. Little goldfinches. And they weren't scared, they were playing. They'd chase each other around the backyard and rest on the fan for a few seconds, do their thing, and off they'd go. My theory about seeking shelter from the hawk was completely wrong. That's okay, it was just a theory. I was proven wrong. Just a theory. So, how many times do we hear that? Many episodes ago, well over 100 episodes ago, I talked about what a theory is. I felt it wouldn't hurt to talk about it again after I ran across this video.
Frankly, Darwinism is not an established scientific fact. It is a theory of evolution. That's why it's called the theory of evolution. And I think that what I'd be concerned with is that it should be taught as one of the views that's held by people, but it's not the only view that's held. And anytime you teach one thing as if it's the only thing, then I think that has a real problem to it.
That was former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. The interview it's old, 15 years old, but it does raise 2 points worth discussing. What is a theory and what is a fact? Evolution by natural selection is a theory. Is evolution by natural selection a fact? Well, no, it's not. But does the clip I played present it correctly? Again, no, it doesn't. It binds together what a theory and a fact is, making it easy to dismiss. So, what are facts and theories? When I theorized about the birds on the couch, what I was really doing was throwing ideas out. I had a hunch, and I was wrong. I didn't test what was going on. I waited to see if I was right, only to find out I was wrong. And it's easy to say, hey, I have a theory, without supporting evidence. But that's not the case with science. A theory in science has a whole lot more weight to it. For a theory to be taken seriously, it has to have behind it a framework of empirical evidence that allow us to make predictions. Empirical means that it's based on data, and that can be both by observation or by experiment. A theory is more than an educated guess. That's a hypothesis. A theory can be modified over time when new evidence is presented, but it's not something that can be summarily dismissed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a theory. My guess about the birds wasn't based on facts and observation. I had only one piece of evidence, the bird poop. The rest was, a story that I made up to explain what I observed. So let's set couches and evolution aside for a moment and look at another example of a theory before we move on to the difference between theory and fact. And it starts with a jigsaw puzzle. A very large jigsaw puzzle. In the late 1800s, German climatologist and geologist Alfred Wegener noticed something about the continents. They seemed to fit together. Although widely separated by oceans, if you pushed them together into each other, it wasn't unlike the pieces of a puzzle. He had a hypothesis to explain what he saw, but he lacked evidence to support it. In 1912, he presented his continental drift hypothesis. And his hypothesis wasn't met with crickets, but it also didn't change the world at the time. That would come much later. Again, his hypothesis that continents had drifted apart wasn't supported by empirical evidence or a mechanism for that drift. Where were the marks on the ocean floor to prove it? A mass as large as a continent, especially that drifted hundreds of miles away from one another, well, they should leave mounds of evidence. Well, we now know the mechanism behind it. It was only after years of evaluation and the collecting of data that plate tectonics was seen to be the mechanism behind continental drift. It's now accepted as a theory. It actually has a mechanistic framework behind it. Predictions can be made. They might not be verifiable immediately. After all, it's an incredibly slow process, as is evolution by natural selection. But you can make predictions and look for the evidence to support it. Just like Darwin did in 1862 when he was presented with the star orchid. He predicted that to get to the nectar, a moth would have to have evolved a very long proboscis. Then in 1882, the giant hawk moth was discovered. Darwin's theory, which was supported by mounds of evidence, allowed him to predict the moth's existence from the comforts of his armchair. What started as a hypothesis had been tested, observed, and has survived all scrutiny. Now, can a theory be proven to be wrong or modified? Well, yeah, but only after sufficient scientific evidence has been collected. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection is the best evidence-supported explanation for the abundance of life in the world around us. So what about fact? Is the theory of evolution by natural selection a fact? No, but again, it's easy to confuse fact with theory. But they're two separate things. You can say natural selection isn't a fact, but that doesn't lessen its importance as a theory. The theory is based on facts. Let me explain. Let's say one morning, I wake up to see the sun shining. It looks beautiful outside. I open a window to let some fresh air in. And then I spot a pink bird of a species that I've never seen in a tree outside. I watch it for a while. I'm amazed at its coloring. The bird's pink color, well, that's a fact. It's almost too pink. It's unnaturally pink even. With my observation of the fact that the bird is pink, come a number of hypotheses I could pursue. Are all birds of that species pink? Or are only the male birds pink? Is that bird even a male? Or did the bird somehow get into a bucket of pink paint? Strange hypothesis, but yeah, it's possible. Or maybe the color is a fluke. Maybe only 1 in a million birds of this species are pink, like some mutation of pigment. I can pursue this hypothesis by beginning to investigate. I can look for more birds of the same species to test, and I can test each hypothesis until one becomes the better explanation of the fact I observed. If I'm successful in locating a large number of examples, and every other bird of this species is also pink, I can present my theory that this species of bird is always pink. My theory is backed up by facts, observations, and I can test this by predicting what their offspring will look like. And theories, of course, can be proven wrong over time. Someone else may have a hypothesis that this species of bird is only pink in the northern hemisphere and begin to test that. Perhaps those tests end up supporting my original theory, so my pink bird pigment theory remains the best explanation for this species coloring. Another person comes along and hypothesizes that they're only pink in the daylight and that at night they're blue. It's a crazy hypothesis, but okay. So they go off and test it. They come back with boxes of data to support their theory that the sun plays a big part in the bird's coloring. They add to their hypothesis some reason of why this is the case, and it eventually becomes the better explanation, and their theory pushes mine aside. Well, you can't win them all. Right, Lamarck?
Please don't remind me. I made a mistake.
Now, if you remember, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck had his own theory to explain the fact of evolution. He called it use and disuse. He presented ideas and evidence to support it. Lamarck's theory had its holes, but it remained a prevalent theory until Charles Darwin came along and dropped a little book on the world called On the Origin of Species. Darwin too had a theory to explain the abundance of species and how they evolved. He called it natural selection, and he also had decades of work to support it. And to this day, it remains the strongest explanation for the life we see around us. It's allowed us to make predictions and also to test them. In 1863, Darwin wrote a letter which was published in the British literary magazine The Athenaeum. He said this:
Whether the naturalist believes in the views given by Lamarck or Geoffroy St. Hilaire, by the author of Vestiges, by Mr. Wallace and myself, or in any other such view, signifies extremely little in comparison with the admission that species have descended from other species and have not been created immutable. For he who admits this as a great truth has a wide field open to him for further inquiry.
He also allowed that his theory could be modified by future studies.
I believe, however, from what I see of the progress of opinion on the continent and in this country, that the theory of natural selection will ultimately be adopted with, no doubt, many subordinate modifications and improvements.
Now here's a fact. Theories are not facts. Theories explain facts. So when you hear someone say something like this,
Frankly, Darwinism is not an established scientific fact. It is a theory of evolution. That's why it's called the theory of evolution.
you can explain to them where their reasoning breaks down. Politely. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Evolution Talk. Now, I'm Rick Coast, and if you find value in this show, please consider supporting it at evolutiontalk.com. I'd love to keep this show alive and without ads, and I can only do so with your assistance. So help spread the word. Share the show with some friends. At evolutiontalk.com, you'll also find information, show notes, recommended books, and also ways to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. I hope your week is going well, and until next time, please take care of yourself.
Evolution Talk is a Rick Coast production.